May 5th, 2011, Spider-Man 4 was supposed to open in theaters worldwide. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4 might just be the biggest what if in superhero movie history. Especially after the poor reception of the Amazing Spider-Man movies with Andrew Garfield, it just made people question much more what could have been with Spider-Man 4. And while it seems like Spider-Man is back on the right track in the MCU, it's still fun to think about what could have been with Raimi's Spider-Man 4. So I'm going to break down the lost script of Spider-Man 4 and what could have been. But Sony did not want to wait for Raimi to get the perfect script, so instead they decided to quickly turn around and reboot the entire franchise. But what was in Raimi's script for Spider-Man 4? I think it's definitely better than what we got in the Amazing movies. Sam Raimi has said himself that he was not happy with Spider-Man 3 and that he wanted to end the series off perfectly with Spider-Man 4. He also takes the blame for not hitting the deadline set by Sony, which resulted in Spider-Man 4 getting scrapped. He knew that he did not meet the deadlines, and he knew that the company was already kind of planning this reboot, so he just went to them and he said, "Go ahead with your reboot. I did not meet your deadlines." And it was a very mutual thing, even though obviously he wanted to see Spider-Man 4 hit the big screen. The main villain of Spider-Man 4 would have been someone we ended up seeing on the big screen years later, that being the Vulture. But Raimi actually wanted to have the Vulture in Spider-Man 3 alongside Sandman rather than Venom, who Raimi really didn't care for because of his lack of humanity, and Raimi is a very animated guy with his characters, and obviously with Venom, that's very hard to pull off. But Raimi was pushed towards Venom by the studio due to the character's popularity, but I think we could all tell that Venom wasn't supposed to be in Spider-Man 3, as it just felt rushed and didn't belong, and you could tell Raimi did not want Venom in that movie. John Malkovich was the favorite to play the Vulture in Spider-Man 4, with other actors like Sir Ben Kingsley and other names also being thrown around for the role. Raimi wanted to blow people away with his take on the Vulture. He did not want him to just be, quote, an old guy in a silly green suit, unquote. Luckily for us, we did end up getting a great performance from Michael Keaton as the Vulture, but it really hurts not knowing what Raimi would have done with the character, as he was great with villains, as we saw with Dr. Octopus. Sandman had great potential if he was the main villain, and of course the Green Goblin. I truly believe Raimi's take on the Vulture could have been something really unique, and could have been the greatest challenge that Spider-Man faced yet, as Raimi was saying he wanted to up the stakes. He knew what went wrong with Spider-Man 3, and he wanted to perfect this movie, so it could have been amazing. But although the Vulture was the main focus, he was not the only villain planned for Spider-Man 4. There's actually a lot more. First, let's start off with one that you're probably familiar with. Sam Raimi is planning on having Anne Hathaway to play Felicia Hardy, who is better known as Black Cat. It's fair to say that this is the biggest missed opportunity in the loss of Spider-Man 4. Honestly, I lose sleep at night knowing that we were on the verge of greatness but never quite achieved it. But shout out to The Dark Knight Rises, we did at least get Catwoman for Anne Hathaway, so all hope was not lost. But being a bit more serious, I really think this could have been a really interesting character to conflict with Peter and his relationship with MJ, and it could have been a little bit more mental torment for Spider-Man when he's actually Spider-Man, because most of the things that were on the mental side of his complications in these movies was when he was as Peter Parker. So this could have added a whole nother layer and added a layer of maturity. Obviously it doesn't have to go like overly sexual or anything, but it just could have added some interesting dynamics that we haven't really seen in a Spider-Man film yet, and we're probably not going to see for a while in our now Tom Holland Spider-Man, because he's still quite young in that series, and MCU is very kid-friendly. But like I said, the manipulation and stuff that Black Cat could use to just get Peter completely off track, and she could have been teaming up with Vulture or one of the other villains that I'm going to get into in a minute, could have been really interesting, and it's really just a sad thing to think about all the potential this movie had. And while the Black Cat is the main theory, there's also rumors that Raimi actually wanted Felicia Hardy to be reimagined as a similar high-flying figure known as the Vultress, which could have been super cool to see on the screen. But either way, whether it was Black Cat or this Vultress character, it could have been great. Now with all this talk about Spider-Man 4, I want you guys to let me know what you wanted to see in Spider-Man 4. If you could put anything in the movie, it doesn't have to be anything that's in this that was confirmed. Anything you want, leave a like. It really helps YouTube show that this is a not garbage video. But let's get back to it. There's still more villains though, as I mentioned earlier, that Raimi had in his back pocket, some of which we eventually got on the big screen. One of those being Mysterio, who would have been played by Bruce Campbell, because he was already familiar with Raimi from the Evil Dead movies, and he was a leading man for Mysterio. But Mysterio would have actually just been a side villain in here, Raimi did not view him as someone that could be a main villain. Obviously, we saw Spider-Man Far From Home take that route, but Sam Raimi did not have that vision for Mysterio. What Mysterio would have been included in this movie probably would have been one of the best scenes in superhero film history. Raimi wanted a scene where Spider-Man apprehends a bunch of C and D-list villains that he knew would never be main antagonists. Like I said, Mysterio ended up being one, and some of these other ones might also, but at the time, Raimi had no plans for them being main villains, so he wanted to include them somehow. So Mysterio was one of those, like I said, but others that would have been in this scene would have been Shocker, the Prowler, and an old school version of the Rhino. Now, we do know the Shocker and Prowler are in the MCU universe, and obviously we got to see the Rhino in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Prowler was also in Spider-Verse, so we did get to see these villains later on, but once again, it just doesn't have the Raimi charm, and it would have been really interesting to see what he could do. Learning from the mistakes with the kind of cluttered villain situation going on in Spider-Man 3, he still wanted to add more and more villains, but I think he would be okay. Like, it sounded like he wanted to have them be just minor parts in the movie, with the Vulture being the main focus still. Could have been a bit of a miniature Sinister Six situation going on too, but sadly we'll never get to see. Raimi truly loved his characters, and it's fair to say that Raimi was not backing down from the challenge when it came to upping the stakes for the 4th Spider-Man movie. Maybe if Sony wasn't so prepared to reboot the series, we could have gotten the best Spider-Man film yet. But now, over 9 years after the original Spider-Man 4 was originally scheduled to open in theaters, it's forever a what if. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like and sub, and click on one of the videos or playlists on the screen here. I have tons and tons of Marvel movie and video game content, more Spider-Man stuff, so everything you're looking for is up on the screen right now. I'll see you guys in the next one.